What's up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of Game Dev Unchained, the #1 podcast about game development and the lifestyle thereof. I am your host, Brandon Pham, and this week he has a special guest. He's been on the show before, and I'm going to cue in Brad Hart. How you doing, Brad?
Hear from you again.
Good to hear from you, man. So for people who haven't listened to the last episode, can you give them a quick reminder of who you are, where you're from, and where you're heading?
Yeah, absolutely. So Brad Hart, I'm the CTO at Perforce with a specific focus on the Helix Core version control product, which a lot of you folks in the gaming industry are probably very familiar with. I also run the ALM Handsoft product, which is for project management and very popular in the game space as well. And now taking on a new product called Rebel, which is a Java accelerator for people doing Java development. Background's kind of always been in version control and large scale enterprise development organizations. Started a company a number of years ago that was sold off to Micro Focus in the same version control space. Used to actually compete against Perforce back in the day, which is kind of fun to be here now. But yeah, super excited to be back on the show and talking to hopefully some of the people that are using our products every day, or hopefully will be at some point.
Yeah, so since the last time we talked, a lot has happened. I guess the last 3 months, especially.
I have no idea what you're talking about.
Yeah, I know, right? What were we doing at home all the time? Well, what I like to kind of start off with all our guests is kind of asking how the COVID-19 has affected the business, your personal routine, and all that, to kind of give an update out there of where you're coming from your specific industry.
Yeah, I mean, it's I'm sure it's no different than what a lot of folks are dealing with. For me personally, it's not a whole lot different. I work on a remote location anyways. I live in New Hampshire, and our corporate office is in Minneapolis, and we development sites are in Alameda, California, and Wokingham, UK, et cetera. We have a number of different sites. So if I'm not on the road visiting customers or going to GDC, things like that, I'm typically working from home. So for me personally, the routine's pretty normal. For the company, it's definitely been a change. All of our teams, finance, marketing, development, everybody's made the shift to working remote, and we've handled it really well. I mean, I think we kind of got ahead of it a little bit. We kind of anticipated it, so we made sure our infrastructure was ready, and so the teams, our development teams I think they're actually going faster than before. I think people, they tend to, when they're home, you almost tend to work more. I think the traditional negative connotation of people working from home is that they're not going to work as much. They're going to hang out with their family and friends. They're going to goof off, whatever. But I think the reality is, and I'd like to get your opinion based on what you're hearing, is that people almost tend to work harder. They tend to work longer because there's no break point. So work never really stops, nights, weekends, et cetera. So it's actually on our minds and the management team of how do we keep people from burning out, right? How do we make sure they're taking the break of, work versus life? I don't know. Are you hearing similar things or?
Yeah, definitely. I think there is a correlation. Again, I think a lot of it comes from training. I mean, it sounds like you have a lot of experience with remote working, but I feel like, and I've been kind of doing it for the past year myself. But before then, I was kind of doing a lot of side hustles and things past my 9 to 5 that helped train me into that position. And so the last time, the few guests and the people that I know in the industry that are transitioning aside from their company, kind of uprooting their IT infrastructure to kind of get everyone set up. We're talking about like huge companies with huge amount of individuals. That was certainly a challenge, but people themselves, adding the component, the X factor that maybe even with me and you being experienced working from home and being efficient, the kids suddenly not having the rest of the school year to go to is another level of working from home that I don't think anybody anticipated. So I think a lot of people are sort of struggling even without these kind of barriers. But with it, extraordinarily difficult because parents are being asked to be teachers as well now too, which is another factor.
Yeah, no, it's tough. I mean, I know people, certainly some of the folks that are on my teams where they like my case, my wife isn't working right now because she works at a surgical center, and she works with mostly elective surgeries. So that shut down. So she's able to take care of the kids. Where I know some of the people that are on my team, they're both still working and their kids are home, to your point. Who watches them when? Who's teaching them? And so there's a lot of the interesting side effect of it. Been seeing people are sort of doing like a trade-off routine, right? All right, you get the first couple hours and I'll switch off. And what happens is, it's funny, I know my interaction and my workload has increased because of people doing that. The overall day gets longer because not everybody on my team's following the same schedule. So it's early morning till very late at night. You don't know who needs what when. So it's very different. Like you said, you're not really prepared for it. Me personally, to your point, I love that fact you said side hustle. I've always had a side hustle, right? Especially when starting a small company, it was like money wasn't huge, right? So, I was always taking on projects on the side and doing this and working on smaller companies and helping people out. So, the late night hours, the weekends, the doing things remotely has just been second nature to me. But this is new. This is new with families and the schedules, and it's so as a company too, we're trying to be very sensitive to that. My thing is in managing my teams is like, you're going to get your stuff done when you get your stuff done, right? We're just going to work together on the results, and we're going to focus on what's important and making sure we're there to help our customers, right? I mean, that's kind of part of what we've done too, is really put a focus on, especially in the gaming space, right? You're dealing with, certainly with people in their day jobs in the larger companies, they're dealing with, massive amounts of files and huge files and lots of people. So, we've been reaching out to our customers and, kind of teaching them some best practices about sort of scaling out that infrastructure, moving some of that to the cloud, using our tools and products in the right way to help support people that are working remotely, right? So we've got a lot of that coming in. People saying like, how do I take my 6,000 users and use your software to build our games when we're all remote? And so we've been working with them very proactively. There's been a dramatic shift into that sort of mode for our teams to support our customers, and it's gone great. Unfortunately, we're designed for that. That's really some of the strengths of our software, but it's really kind of come.
I believe I lost you for a second there.
I got a little weird lag there.
Yeah. Well, I mean, we'll cut that out. No one will know. let me see. I hear your voice, but I'm not seeing your web. Oh, there we go. Perfect. So kind of moving on to that, I think you were somewhat prophetic the last time you were on, talking about having people source up to Perforce 10,000 companies is less impressive than having 10,000 people onto Perforce at the same time from the same company. And that was almost a year ago.
Yep.
It was almost like crazy that you kind of foresee this type of near future issue for Perforce that you've been warning everybody about. And it is so much happening. I mean, the game industry themselves, who are the hugest proponent for using Perforce for over 2 decades now, are still having a lot of issues just thinking at a different angle with everybody being remote. I can't imagine other industries at this point who are 10 steps behind, learning where they, I mean, how's that handling all that type of questions coming in at this time?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. Like you said, it's kind of been, scale across the globe, and thinking about remote teams and all that has kind of always been in our wheelhouse. So we design for it. Part of the vision that I've had with the product is that that's only going to increase, and it's going to get more difficult as 4K, 8K, all that comes to fruition. It's not getting easier to work in these environments, right, with the size of the data. So we're always trying to stay ahead of that curve and build that culture in our company to support those kinds of environments. And we have stuff in our roadmap that's going to just take this all to a new level from a scalability perspective for people working remotely, working locally. It really doesn't matter to us. I want it to be ubiquitous. Wherever somebody's seat is in the globe, they should experience the same performance and the same ability to do work, regardless of where they're located. So that's really driving the strategy on a lot of our products. So we're well suited for it, fortunately.
So aside from that, though, like as this was happening around the globe and finally hitting North America, I think about a month delay. You guys were already set up for this type of situation. Were you, even with the preparedness, were you ready for the whole world to kind of plug in and kind of use the number one file management system out there? I mean, I can't think of any other type of product out there that is allowing teams to kind of coordinate, cooperate, and work with each other at this scale. Literally every company in the world right now is needing this type of file management system to talk to each other, essentially, aside from video chatting all the time.
Yeah, no, I mean it's been from an infrastructure perspective on our part, we were ready because we saw sort of it's kind of the mold that people were working in anyway. So where you can use like the Perforce products anywhere, but where we really shine, right, where we really stand out is when there's some dimension of scale, right? Whether it's lots of files, huge files, lots of products, lots of product variants, or lots of people working on it, or certainly teams distributed across the globe. So it's just been part of our messaging, right? And part of our enablement is to allow this sort of global spread of data and collaboration regardless. So a team in the UK can just as easily contribute to the same set of code or assets that a team in California or Boston is, right? And there's literally no difference. There's no restrictions that are slowing them down, and so it just really fit in line with how we work anyways. And we've been seeing the trends as well where people are moving their infrastructure using our platform, where traditionally certainly across the board 10 years ago and earlier, it was all local, right? So massive files, large servers, all the people are working locally. And if per chance somebody was to do something remote, it would have to be through some sort of VPN kind of situation, or remote access, et cetera. Whereas we've seen some of our biggest customers are now looking to move, and have already started moving a lot of their infrastructure of Perforce into the cloud. They've already started that, and they're looking at and being very attentive to the different regions where they set up servers. And with our products, they're setting up the different replication technologies we have, again, so that somebody on this side of the globe, we don't want to have a positive experience and somebody on the other side of the globe to have a negative experience. So with our products and our replication capabilities, which we've been working with customers for years with, they replicate that data all across the globe. So it really doesn't matter where you are. We're going to give that same sort of local-like experience, whether it's local hardware or it's in the cloud. It doesn't matter. We're sort of ubiquitous with us. So that's kind of, this situation is just sort of right in our wheelhouse for what we're doing anyways. So we've been fortunate, and it's shown too. Certainly with the gaming market, with people at home, and some people aren't working, unfortunately, or even people that are working but can't go out to dinner or go bowling or go to the movies. Gaming, their demand is up, right? I'd love to get your take on that. We're certainly seeing it. I know I'm personally, me and my wife play golf on the PS4 every night right after we put the kids to bed. Wasn't doing that before, and it's kind of an interesting trend. So our customers they're under the wire. They've got to deliver software and games, because they're seeing a lot of pressure to produce content for people. What have you seen there?
No, I definitely agree. I think at first, when people were anticipating how many were going to be at home and turning usually to entertainment to kind of ease the time suffering, basically, A lot of people were kind of guessing that they won't be spending as much money, but more like going towards freeware or mobile games, on a cheaper side.
Mm-hmm.
But data are in saying that people are spending more money
Mm-hmm.
towards game industry stuff, which is great for us. Um, for everybody essentially, because there's only so many times I can lap in my backyard, very
Right.
limited space, before I have to go back in the house and do something. And so and not knowing how long this will be, people are saying summer, or even this is 2020 basically.
Right.
A lot of people are adjusting to the new normal and everything. Something that you touched on a bit, that has been somewhat controversial, and I just want to know your opinion on it, since it kind of correlates, to your company, but also to the industry overall, has been data cap, right? That is a very new concept in the last year and a half, and more than ever, thankfully, recently, a lot of the internet companies have relaxed their measures on data cap, letting people actually spend more time. How do you see that conversation returning after this kind of subset? Because that's a pretty insane thing to think that we should limit any of that and charging people more.
Yeah, I mean, I think my from a personal consumer perspective, I mean, I'm completely against that, right? And the data throttling and all that. And I think it would be to your point, it would be a horrible look in today's climate, for them to be enforcing that and trying to garner more dollars out of the consumers. I think it's interesting to see how that will play out moving forward once we're kind of out of the fray here, even if it's late this year or next year, or whatever, when things are back to whatever normal we're going to have. It's going to be interesting. I think, I heard something like, you know, people were kind of talking at the beginning of all this, like, you can learn a lot about your company or the people that you do business with, the people, the restaurants, the stores, your own employment. You're going to learn a lot about um, companies and people based on how they treat people during the situation, right? So I think the companies that are being, empathetic towards, the situation where people are home, a lot of people aren't working, and then how they deal with it now, and how they, how quickly do they kind of go back to business as normal and try to squeeze, right? I mean, everybody's in business to make money, but it's going to be, I think there's going to be a chance for some companies to sort of separate themselves based on their approach, right? You're seeing it with the airline industries, right? Like, so, I fly Delta a lot, and they kind of came out and basically just said, your status, whatever you had, is good till 2021, right? Like, don't worry about it. Marriott did the same thing. So it's like some of these companies they're thinking about what the daily person's thinking about, and what life's going to be like when they go back to normal. And it's just one example, right? So, I know my cell phone carrier, they're increasing the amount of free hotspot usage you can use right now. I think those are good things to do. I mean, a little bit of good grace and goodwill, I think, goes a long way. Like, to your point, though, I don't have a forecast on what they're going to do once they can kind of start to leverage things again. It's going to be interesting, but I think it's an opportunity to sort of separate out a company's mindset and their persona, once things kind of loosen up a little bit.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, after all this, for sure. Well, during this, I kind of am thinking like how much they really need to kind of charge overages now that within a short amount of time they can just like, oh, we'll forget all the data caps, just use all you want. It seems to be somewhat not as expensive as they were kind of making it out to be.
Well, I mean, of course it's not. I mean, I don't know, like, so maybe I'm dating myself here, but back when you used to have to, with cell phones, you used to have to pay for text messages, right? I remember it was like 10 cents a message. And, the funny reality was, so what your cell phones used to do is they would send a message to the tower every, X number of seconds, and just to kind of always, communicate and let the cell phone know where it is and all that jazz. Well, that message, the reason why your text messages were limited to a certain number of characters was because that was the size of the message that was being sent to the tower. So all they did to allow you to send text messages and charge you 10 cents a message was allow you to customize that message, right? So it wasn't costing them anything. These are messages that are already being sent. You're just allowed to change the content. So it was kind of a nice win-win for them for a while until everybody kind of got bullied into, unlimited text messaging. But to your point, was it costing them anything? I don't know. I don't know. I don't run those businesses, but it's a way to leverage money. And if they all kind of do it, then it's I wouldn't call it collusion, but if everybody's doing it, then they can all get away with it. But all it takes is, it takes one company to kind of lead that path of no, we're going to charge a fair price for a fair product, and then it kind of forces the other people to follow suit.
Yeah, I mean, we definitely saw that when all the internet companies came together and say that. Yeah, it was definitely controversial because last year, if anything, I don't remember a single consumer agreeing to it, and it was kind of funny, kind of seeing it get passed anyways, and
Right.
it was disappointing. But if anything, I think that conversation will be revisited somehow after all this. More people are seeing the usage of internet and the democracy of it being pretty important, and
Sure.
it'd be very, among other things, a very interesting place to kind of pick up the mantle and talk about it again. You mentioned
No,
before,
absolutely.
yeah.
Yeah.
You mentioned before about helping these companies putting their data in the cloud server, right? So being in the industry myself for many years and dealing with big companies, that's like the biggest horrific thing to suggest to these guys because of
Right.
IP protection and NDA. They just have this bad image about the cloud because once it's up there, that's free to grab for everybody. But now we're in a forced situation, not just about the cloud, but the idea of remote working is very new to these big companies, right? So I would love to
Absolutely.
kind of hear your insight about that.
Well, it's funny too because it's like people are realizing that you know you got people that have sort of old school mentalities, right? And years ago when I was first in the sort of the version control space back when in my ClearCase days, um, you know nothing was ever even remotely possible with putting anything in the cloud, right? You barely, even if you were, it was painful getting two sites to work together. Like they wouldn't even allow VPN connection. You would have to, to get direct access. A lot of times you would have to sort of remote shell in or use like a remote access software, so you weren't actually physically holding any of the data. You could just see it through a terminal window, right? And we started to see a transition over time where things that are viewed as maybe less critical, like issue tracking, right? Issue tracking, all of a sudden, requirements management, project management, some of those things started to move towards the cloud because it was easy to administrate, et cetera, and easier to share globally. But we're like the IP, the source code, the IP, certainly gaming, semiconductor, finance, government. They were very slow to move to the cloud. But I think but even before the situation, there were some forward thinkers, even in these large companies, traditionally that would have no zero leverage points to be able to go do anything in the cloud, especially with the IP. There were leaders, right? We have customers that are very large in both of those markets that you would be surprised that are working with us to move all of their infrastructure in the cloud because they see it is they see the obvious benefits of going to the cloud around not having to manage your own iron and VMs and all that kind of stuff. That's the obvious benefit. There's the geographically distributed, a collaboration benefit, and you can set up multiple zones and all that, which they don't have to deal with all that themselves. right? And it's enabling people to work, for all around the globe, and be able to turn up and down resources at the push of a button, being able to do, disaster recovery easier, et cetera. So they see the advantages, and then you get some of these forward-thinking leaders in these companies, and they've been pushing this agenda. And it's an expensive, costly transition, and that's what we're there for, to help, reduce risk and make it easier. And so we've been working with some of these companies right along. But now in this situation, you're seeing people forced into it. They're forced to look at it. How do we open this up? Remote working has, in a lot of companies, kind of mentioned it earlier, has a pretty negative connotation in a lot of companies. Again, it's, the thought process is, if you're not, holding hands with your neighbor, you're not going to be working hard. You can't have teamwork. You can't collaborate. But in the reality is, as great as it is to sit next to the person, the team of people that you work with, you can collaborate just fine. I mean, I've had people that have started working for me during this time, that I fully ramped, that I talk to, Slack. We do Zoom meetings. We still do team meetings with some of the folks from the different offices, where it's not just meetings. We do happy hours every Thursday night, and it's a blast. And it's kind of neat. You get to see people's homes, and you see their dog or their kids or their spouse pop in, and it's actually, I think, in some ways, gotten us closer as a group of coworkers. And I think through this environment, companies that were against both cloud and against remote work are forced to sort of see the light, that it is not only okay, in some ways, it can be very beneficial. Now, they might not be set up and enabled for it, and that's where they have to be able to learn to use collaboration tools, Zoom, WebEx, etc. They have to, maybe their VPNs are getting stressed, and they're looking at alternate solutions, and maybe less costly open source solutions to be able to help with sort of scale that out to their environment. We actually have some products that help with that as well in our portfolio. So it's they're looking at things a different way. So IT, ops, right? The CIOs of these companies are now being put in a position where it's not a choice. It's they have to find a way to make it happen. The question's going to be, in my mind, it's kind of like the tide comes in and the tide's going to go back out. But the question is how far is it going to go back out? And how much is going to be left behind, right? So what's the permanent effect of this, right? The working from home, once this is over next year, we might have some CEOs that are going to still say, this is no good. This is unacceptable. Everybody's got to get back 100% in the office because that's the way we work, which is okay. That's fine. And then I think there's going to be some percentage, though, that are going to either fully embrace, the work remote thing, or they're going to certainly be more tolerant of, hey, twice a week people can work from home, whatever, pick certain days, whatever. I think it's going to leave a permanent mark on the remote working, and I think it's going to be a very positive thing. I think people's work-life balance, just stress of commuting, et cetera, I think it's going to leave a positive impact. And then the cloud thing, I think once that train starts running, it's not going to go back, right? And so, I know that the big three providers of the cloud, we're partners with all of them, and they're all seeing, tremendous upticks in resource requests and all that, as people are moving, infrastructure into the cloud over even the last 2 months.
Yeah, definitely. I think the old ways of game developers having a server room where it's about to explode the studio has to go. I mean, it just sounds so unsafe as is. And like you said, the many benefits of working in the cloud and geographically, and the accessibility for developers around the world to work together. And you're already touching on the point that I was going to ask you about, what does it look like when things return to normal? What is the new normal? And I do agree with you how a percentage will see the benefits, or at least have by that time adjusted to the benefits of remote working. Mm-hmm. And I have a hard time believing that they're just going to blow up all that infrastructure that is set up for months
Right.
and return to
Right.
old ways. So there's going to be some remnants of it for sure. If
Right.
not like a completely clear choice for the developer to either work on site or off site, but at least allowing a slight small percentage of the workforce to have that choice during the week, or even better, invite and not having to relocate out of country
Right.
developers or out of location developers. That's a huge advantage to our industry for sure. Because
Oh,
that's what,
absolutely. Yeah. I'm sorry. Go
yeah.
ahead.
But I think you're about to say it. But like the reason why we like remote working is that I like living in a certain area and not having to
Mm-hmm.
move for my career, which I've done, and I'm pretty sure you've done many times. It gets very tiring to kind of uproot and get new friends, essentially.
Yeah. No, for me, it's all about the right person, right? And it doesn't matter where they are, right? And if you can enable and attract the best talent you can, and that's how you win in today's world, right? You need the right people. You don't need the right volume of people. You need the right players. And if you can get A players and support them, even if they're not all centrally located in one place. And again, there is tremendous benefit to having a team centrally located. There's a lot of great stuff that happens. But if you have some knobs you can turn, where there's certain people or certain groups of people that you can support because you need them and they don't happen to be located where everybody else is, or again, people are working in the city and it takes them an hour and a half to get into work, and boy, I tell you, 1 or 2 days a week where you don't have to do that and pull your hair out in the car, that's a big win from a personal standpoint and a mental sanity standpoint. So I think just having more knobs that companies can turn to kind of fine tune the way they work, I think it's a great thing.
Yeah, I totally agree. I always associate office politics with being in the office. So having the ability to work from home, I think it solves a lot of issues. I really do. It solves a lot of problems. Even the idea of crunch being like always like a front page topic for the game industry in the past few
Mm-hmm.
years. I feel a lot of
Mm-hmm.
that can be eliminated by being at home. I mean, um,
Mm-hmm.
just if not the transitional step for a healthier lifestyle, right? I would much
Mm-hmm.
rather work more at home than actually in a different location and have to do that crazy commute that you were talking about. And I was reading a lot of these topics, right? People feeling that well, this we already know about. People who are experienced with remote working, the day feels longer in terms of you getting more work done, because essentially you are having a longer day. You're limiting about
Mm-hmm.
3 hours, right? Going
Right.
to and from the office, and then that lunch period, essentially,
Right.
where you kind of step away from your desk. But yeah, I like the fact that everybody is kind of experiencing this from both the employer and employee uh,
Yep.
mindset. And I think, if anything, there is going to be a conversation when there is a return to the office. Both have seen how this has worked. And I don't think people will be completely thumbs up okay with like, well, I mean, we've been doing this for 6 months. What do you
Right.
mean it hasn't been efficient? We're still here. You like us enough. There's got to
Yep.
be
Yep.
some of this back and forth, right?
Yeah, and we tend to look at things based on results, right? So, our development teams, we've got a schedule and we're shipping on time through all this. Our builds are all happening. I work with the sales teams. We're still hitting numbers. It's like the train keeps moving, right? And to your point, people are actually more productive, I think, because they're not working less, right? That commute time they get back, they're actually working during that time and producing things, and it's actually tough to get them to shut off, right? It's a tough thing when you don't have to get in your car and go home to turn it off. So people are working a ton, and sort of the distractions of the hallway conversations, which are perfectly fine and fun. You don't get any of that, right? I work in my office, and my wife and kids they're running. I mean, I'll go down and get coffee like 6, 7 times a day, but that's all I see them. I'm not having coworkers come by and talk and shoot the breeze, whatever, which is nice. I enjoy that, but I'm cranking all day, and that's for me, it feels good. I like to be able to just constantly, once I'm in a mode, just keep pounding, right? Especially if I'm writing code or something like that. I just want to go.
Yeah, totally. I think coworkers are fun, and if anything, we are seeing the aspect of being around people. We are social creatures, and so when
Right.
this is all over, we're gonna hug our friends more and enjoy that time for sure. But when it comes to work and we're being at work, friends are distractions. We're trying to get through the day. How many times do I get up? How many times do I really need to eat Doritos, right? I mean, these are kind of breaks that we're taking throughout the day to kind of get through the day. But when you're at home, you're focusing, you're trying to get the work done so that you have more time to yourself. And it's a different type of,
Right.
motivation for sure. Um, Going back to what you were saying before, and there was a few points that you were saying that really is resonating with a lot of people, that even with myself. There seems to be a lot more empathy now since all this is happening, where we're more
Hmm.
we're prefacing or even ending with conversations asking like how you doing and really meaning it this
Hmm.
time. So I think
Yeah,
that's a
exactly.
very positive positive um, perspective of this. Yeah. Aside from that, though, you were also talking about now that your company yourself are helping a lot of these major companies from major industries kind of get into the cloud and see the benefits, and helping their force thinking and kind of comforting them at the same time. Uh, what were the common misconceptions about remote working that you were constantly having to maybe explain, or that keeps being brought up with new customers that are totally squashed at this point? But like, what are people coming to you and being resistant about it at first that you feel like keeps coming up?
So, like within our company or with our customers?
Everyone, everywhere.
Yeah. So I think there's a couple that falls in a couple buckets around the misconception. This is just from everything I'm hearing from different companies, from talking to customers, et cetera. It's kind of some of the things I touched on before too. Like, um, we're not going to be able to maintain a culture, right, without having people sitting next to each other. People aren't going to work as many hours. They're not going to be as productive because they're home and they're going to get distracted, and their family's going to be there, or the couch is looking awful good. Netflix happens to be available 24 hours a day. We're not going to have the infrastructure that we need so that they can be productive. Our VPN is going to get overloaded. We're not going to be able to give them access to the data, et cetera. And I think in large part, those, as we've seen with our customers, et cetera, and even internally, those are, really all been debunked. The team collaboration is there. I think if anything, I know I have personally proactively tried to amp up my reach outs to people. To your point with how you doing, and you really mean it. You really mean it, right? Like, I can remember back in my lifetime, walking down the hall and you ask somebody, "Hey, how you doing?" And you're like, "Please don't actually answer that question. I really don't want to know how you're doing. I just try to be polite, man."
Yeah.
But now it's like you really want to know, like, "Hey, how you hanging in there?" Because it can be stressful. And I think the collaboration's been great. And again, this isn't like 20, 30 years ago, right? We're very fortunate. It sounds weird to say that we're fortunate right now, but we're very fortunate with the infrastructure and the capabilities and the tools that we have to collaborate, right? Like I said, the Slacks and the Zooms and the WebExes of the world, it's far more efficient than email for collaboration, and the real time talking, and being able to see somebody throw something up on the board. I was training a new employee recently, and I'm a big whiteboard guy when I'm trying to explain a concept. And I was trying to like kind of go through what the development world looks like, and how our Perforce Helix core product helps out large enterprises, et cetera. And I tend to do this a lot with a whiteboard training, and I don't have any materials or anything. I kind of just run through the concepts. I've always been like that. And I found some tools online, and with screen sharing and my tablet, it wasn't as good, but it worked. Right? I would not have been able to do that 15 years ago, right?
Mhm.
So we, the concerns that people have going into this are valid, but they're valid from a previous timeline point of view. The infrastructure is there, especially with the cloud services that we have. For people to take their existing data room and server room and start opening up ports and all that other stuff to give access to the outside world, that's risky. You brought up security earlier in this conversation. That is so much easier to set up. Believe me, I've written my own, IP chains, rules and things on Linux servers to try to lock things down. And it's, you got to do it right. And it's a pain, right? And you can make mistakes if you don't do it every day. With the cloud providers, right? It's all there. It's click, point this. You're only going to allow this from these people, from these IP ranges. It's pretty darn easy to set up and to do it right and to keep your data secure. So getting the infrastructure available, sharing access, allowing teams to collaborate. We happen to be working in a world where it's very easy to do that. And, certainly our products at Perforce leverage the infrastructure that's out there to be able to then provide that sort of application layer for people to do their job more efficiently. So I think a lot of that, those are really the four buckets where I saw the concerns going into it. But it's really proved to be, quite doable. Is that similar to what you've seen?
Yeah, definitely. I think with the training we've had, a lot of remote workers, and we kind of mentioned this before. A lot of people are. There's a transitional period that we have to go through to kind of get used to it. Especially if you have a family and other people involved within the household, you got to set some house rules to kind of prepare everybody. And for me personally, I've been doing this for a year, but with the side hustle, that definitely helped. But now we're going with core hours, right? Not everyone is asleep during when the sun is out. So there's like a different type of aspect of it. And it took me about, I think, 2 months to finally get into the groove of things and set some house rules that people abide to. And at the same time, having some flexibility within those house rules to take advantage of the situations. So, I am at home, and if the kid wants to play a little, I can spare 30 minutes or 20 minutes or 20 minutes to 30 minutes to kind of throw the ball around and not have.
I went for a walk with my wife and the kids today.
Exactly.
I mean, normally I would not be able to do that, right? So that's like an advantage, and these kids are going to grow. And that was my lunchtime, right? I took a walk, and it was half an hour, and it was great. That's not something I normally get a chance to do, and that gives me a lot more juice, to keep cranking through the day. And I had a question for you. I would love to know what you're hearing. We know, at least we've seen the demand, right? And it makes sense. It's all logical. The demand from for the gaming industry has certainly spiked during this time as people are home. So there's work to do, right? That's just a good thing. What's blocking them? Things like, I've heard, certification of a game on one of on a PS4 or whatever it's like, or the new PS5 is going to be difficult because there's some in-person stuff that has to happen. Like, what along those lines is, with this demand that's there, what's concerning, the game development industry? What's getting in their way during this time?
Well, the whole idea with remote working is definitely the first wall that everyone is hitting right now. I think when this first happened, there was a good month or two where IT, we kind of discussed, we're trying to set everyone up with computer. The thing with, especially in AAA industry with senior developers, right? Unless you do a side hustle, you don't have a really nice rig at home to kind of work on stuff. You kind of do your 9 to 5, you go home and then live your life, which ideally should be the case, right? And be a happy person. But a lot of developers, I say a large percentage on the senior and lead staff, don't have a really nice setup at home. So that was the first barrier into this. There was a huge delay. And at the same time, you're talking about companies. It's super expensive to kind of get this set up, especially with the team size more than 200 people at a lot of these game companies. It's a nightmare scenario because most IT departments at these, even with 300 people, are like 2 people who are just like covered in wires. It's just like those 2 guys or person that has to figure this out, right? And they have the the know-how. It's a lot to do. And so I think we're finally, I think at the beginning of this month, I was hearing from companies and industry friends that they've finally passed that barrier mark. And now they're dealing with essentially deadlines, right? And so this is a phase, and I think we're still in that phase where, because at the same time, all the kids are at home now. Time management is a huge personal issue with a lot of these developers. And so what normally they would get done, and having like a core 6 to 8 hours of work, people are basically just getting 3 hours, and it's not even straight, right? It's just sporadic. Yeah. So that's another factor, and which is why we see a lot of games that are not out yet delaying, and I'm seeing a cascade of delays for big titles for this year. And then the different phases that you were talking about, getting certification. I mean, that's a whole new way of thinking of things. I'm pretty sure there are ways around it, a way. It's just a problem that needs to have a solution, right? It's just provoking people to think a different way to do it, and it's kind of good. It's kind of good to kind of be forced to think of a solution during this period, because it allows more flexibility later. And I think that was just simply not the case before. People had so many options to just go straight to the office and figure this out and have meetings, right? And on top of that, I see a lot of companies, and I think it's a newbie mistake with a lot of companies do remote working. There's a total influx of calendar invites on your scheduling now. Like everybody has to meet every second of the day to make sure that we're good, right? And so these companies are having 8 hours straight. I was listening. I was knowing someone else from a different industry who's in like the kitchen appliance industry. She had like a 6-hour meeting scheduled for a day, not just separate meetings, one whole meeting for 6 hours, which is inhumane, right? Like who actually sits through and learns anything for 6 hours? Exactly. So like right now, that's the phase that the game industry is at with a lot of these companies that are not set up or prepared for this. They are doing that new mistake of just meeting too much and not getting enough done, and just too much Sauron watching, which is understandably, you can get it where you can, you feel like management has to be hands-on all the time. And how do you do that? You do it through meetings, but that's another part of it for sure. But I'm not, from what I've heard, Naughty Dog's just finally postponed to the date of July, right? The game was already done, right? It was just in the testing phase, but they had the same issue where you were QA testing department. Normally they don't like QA department to kind of have these consoles at home, right? So that was another challenge on top of just being in-house, where a lot of them were just not trusted with the IP to continue their job to do the bug fixing, which in turn delays the developers actually fixing the bugs, right? And so we're seeing every phase being figured out right now for game development. And if the rumors are true, this being until the end of summer, even late to next year, even when we return, it's going to be a different thing. Like people are not going to sit next to each other, right? Really. I think this whole cycle is going to eventually be figured out, but there are going to be delays in terms of the original deadlines. It would be silly to think that everyone's going to hit the same deadlines as before without.
Yeah, no, I agree. It makes sense. And, to your point too, people are going to have to figure it out, right? My thought process going into this whole situation was, even thinking about our own company, is this is an opportunity. It's, it's a terrible situation, but it's an opportunity to carve a path and be a leader, right? Exactly. So some of these companies are going to figure it out, and they're going to forge ahead, and they're going to come out on top. Some people are going to, cross their arms. They're not going to want to change the way they do things, and they're going to struggle and potentially fail. So it's really going to be a test of leadership of these companies and the all the employees and their management of, can they be creative? Can they find a new way? right? With when problems occur, that breeds the chance for ingenuity to come through and to find a unique way to attack a problem. And so to me, I don't like the situation, but I like that opportunity, right? Because that's more of a chance to sort of rise above. So it's going to be interesting to see how some of these companies react and where they're at in a year.
I completely agree. Small and big businesses, the one that are going to come out of this, not only surviving but thriving, are the ones that are adopting a new method and evolving their business to kind of work in this type of world. Because for people who are mistaking this as just a seasonal flu, I think it's a huge mistake for sure. It's completely, things have changed. All right, things are very different,
Right.
and there's going to be more gloves and face mask than ever before, at least in North America. Right. And I have a hard time believing that any of these companies, if they return back to their old ways, that they're going to not suffer in some way, either through competition or through their own doing. Right.
Right. Totally.
Yeah. So another question I have in this time was, like, what kind of demand are you seeing from smaller to mid-sized developers, right? So obviously the big fishes are very in need right now, but the small and medium size, I think in the opposite way, they've always been more perceptive of remote working, have somewhat of infrastructure decided. I would love to kind of hear your thoughts about that size of the industry.
Yeah, no, I mean it's actually kind of it's a good point. So I mean, one of the things that we've done is we've promoted our Indie Studio Pack, which is our Helix Core, which is a version control product, and our Handsoft product, which is for doing, managing projects, large projects, agile projects, etc. Very popular with game companies. And we basically have a free version of the combination of those two products that, we've had it and we've been promoting it now and seen a lot of uptick recently where people are saying, hey, we're, to your point, I don't have to commute anymore. So my free time, I'm going to maybe work on a game with some other people that I know or a couple people I work with in previous lives, whatever. And we're not all co-located. So we have to do this remote. We need the tools and the infrastructure to do that. We have that. And we, provide sort of that starter pack for free to people, whether they're a small company or it's a handful of folks that are just getting going. Obviously, the hope for us is, hey, it's great to help people, and then hopefully their product takes off and they become a big paying customer. That's all great for us. But to your point, that you're just, for a lot of reasons, they're more inclined to do that. They don't have an office, right? If it's a side hustle or a small company just getting off the ground, they don't have the money to go pay for an office space and a data room. They're putting stuff in the cloud on Amazon or Azure or Google Cloud, and they're using whatever tools they can cobble together. So we want them, if they're going to start down that road, don't use something that's free and inferior. Start using something that you can get for free, again, with a limited user base, but get the best product you can possibly use, right? The Perforce suite that we have. And so we want to get people off on the right foot so they can get rolling. And it, again, natively supports, sort of this remote environment, whether you're small or you're big. So we've always had a lot of popularity there. And, a lot of times these folks like that as well because they're used to using our products during their day job. And then when they're, at night, it's nice to use products that they're already familiar with, that are integrated with the tools that they use. So it just makes their job easier. They can focus on, their content creation, what they're trying to build, versus, the setup of their infrastructure and all that jazz. So it's a pretty nice nice thing. That's what they've been doing.
Fantastic. You're already starting this, but I think your image disappeared. Do you still hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. My video's broken.
Oh, no worries. Well, I mean, it's my video's broken too. Oh my God, everything's breaking. The quarantine has gotten.
All right, forget this remote thing doesn't work. Forget everything I said for the last hour.
Forget everything. All right. Well, I'm gonna leave it off with this. Right. Everyone can look at my still image. It was nice quarantining with you for the last hour of the podcast. I want to thank you, Brad, for coming on. I want to thank you for giving sage advice to a lot of people out there who are looking at ways to kind of hit their deadlines and not without any further delay. This is the time where I actually hand the mic over to you to kind of shout out, give attention to, and you're already starting this, but any last words before we end to our listeners and viewers out there?
Yeah, I mean, just overall, just hang in there, right? I really am a big believer in kind of what I mentioned is during these times, it's when you get creative, get innovative, right? Look for problems that you can try to solve. Work with what you got. Use your time productively. And if you're working, whether at your main company or your side company, our company is here to support the game development industry. It's always been a big part of what we do, and we will continue to do so. Love the feedback that we get. Always looking for new challenges that we can help solve with you folks. So, again, we've enjoyed, great partnerships with some of the biggest and smallest gaming companies in the world. And it's a great privilege for us to be able to supply them with the, products and tools that they need to do their job. We love what we do. We love what we create, but our job is not for us to be shiny. Our job is to enable, your community to do the wonderful things that they're doing and to provide products that bring joy and for a lot of people. So it's definitely a pleasure. It's been a joy to talk to you again. This is always fun, and I appreciate it.
Well, on behalf of the game dev community, I want to thank you for what you guys are doing. Yourself, Brad, and enabling all these great entertainment that we're enjoying during our quarantining time. Otherwise, we'll be just circling around our house and going crazy for sure. So enabling these developers to keep doing what they're doing. Yeah, keep them coming. Yeah, exactly, yeah. Right? So
I got 5 phones, so I need games.
I know, right? Yeah, I'm definitely playing a lot more games more than ever during this period and still feel productive and healthy. So I want to thank you again, Brad, for coming back onto the podcast and spreading the love out there for everybody that needs it, for sure.
Yeah, great talking to you.
All right, man. Have a good one.